Gareth Hughes.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Kia ora. It's good that our third largest party in Parliament can take a call on this very important bill, and I'm losing a bit of weight because of jumping up and down constantly. I've got to put my cards on the table. I've never been a student politician. Unlike Mr Lees Galloway or Mr Hipkins, I've never been a student exec member or president. But I've still got some important views I want to pass on about what we're doing tonight, which is the purpose of the bill, the whole crux of the issue, which is the debate, which is freedom of association. I do want to touch on what this bill was amending, which is the Education Act, since I wasn't able to touch on it, because what I wanted to bring was the principles of the Education Act, which is about building a smart and prosperous economy. This is what every single member in this chamber is wanting to build for our country. It's about informing Kiwi citizens and Kiwi kids as they grow up, and also being a critic for our Parliament and our society. Now, our government has made a whole host of changes in this sector over the last 2 years, which has made tertiary education less accessible, less affordable, and for those students that can't actually go to university because there aren't enough places, downright impossible. It's dumb economically and isn't part of a step change for building a smart, prosperous economy. Why are we amending this bill in the name of freedom of association? Why are we being such an outlier? I'm looking here at the submission from the Ministry of Education, who says countries that have voluntary student membership, Australia. Now, we know Australia is changing because it just hasn't worked. What are the countries with compulsory student membership? Well, I can see the United Kingdom, Sweden, Norway, a list of other countries. Why are we doing it in the name of freedom of association? The basis is a fundamentally flawed argument. What we're talking about is one narrow-minded, one ideological interpretation of what freedom of association is. Now, what we're talking about is what students' freedom of association, but what we haven't talked about is what students want. Luckily, UMR has done polling of the student body, and what they found was that 87% of students do not support students having the choice. Only 16% of students support the government having the choice, and 6% had no view. The clear message from students is they want the choice. The irony of this bill is the ACT Party, supported by the National Party, is taking away students' choice to organise themselves. And the real reason, of course, is because that tiny ideological minority, the ACT on Campus Club and the Student Choice Club, that couldn't get a few members to form a petition, that couldn't get the numbers, the 10% numbers, to argue with their student body. We're amending section 229A of the Education Act, which shows that the freedom of association provision is still provided under the current status quo, which I call the compromise agreement reached more than 10 years ago, which is the current environment we exist in. Currently, students can opt out. No one is compelling a student to join a student association. And I'd like to point out and put on the table now that, frankly, some of the comments from ACT on Campus around sexual violence have been quite tasteless and are the worst example and a disgrace, a worst example of the arguments for this bill. Because currently section 229A(6) of the Education Act gives students the opportunity to opt out. Section 229A(5) also gives students the opportunity to be exempted from paying membership fees on the grounds of hardship. The fact is their freedom of association is currently protected. We know that student associations aren't like the Crochet Club, they aren't like a political party, they aren't like a union. They're their own unique body, more akin to a council or a nation in the sense that members come together, pay their taxes and have a democratic say. And what this bill, trying to protect freedom of association, instead is doing the exact opposite and taking away students' choices. I think one submission of the thousands we saw on the Select Committee that deserves to be reread again, and I'd ask the members opposite to read it if I can seek leave to table it, is the Human Rights Commission report. And I think when you look at the conclusion, that says it plainly and simply that the purpose of this bill is not achieved through this bill. The Human Rights Commission in their submission says the Commission considers that Section 229... Mr Chair.
I call the Honourable Heather Roy.
Thank you, Mr Chair. It gives me a